The Zephyrian ambassador's 3 hearts hammered against his crystalline ribcage as he stood before the assembled Galactic Council. His people were dying and time was running out. The holographic displays around the circular chamber showed the devastating progress of the Vorthon Empire's conquest across Zephyrian space. Entire star systems had gone dark in mere weeks. Honorable delegates, Ambassador Cathvar began, his translator converting his melodic tones into the common tongue. My people face extinction. The Vorthon war machine has already consumed 12 of our colonies. Our military fleets are scattered, our defenses crumbling. We have perhaps 30 solar cycles before they reach our homeworld. The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. The Vorthons were a nightmare that had haunted galactic civilization for centuries. Their technology was superior, their tactics brutal, and their appetite for conquest insatiable. They had crushed every opponent they encountered, reducing proud civilizations to slavery or ash. Council Speaker Drakthol, a massive reptilian being from the Saurian Confederacy, leaned forward on his elevated platform. The Council sympathizes with your plight, Ambassador. However, military intervention against the Vorthon Empire would require unprecedented cooperation between our member species. The logistics alone would take months to coordinate. Months we don't have, Kethavar replied, desperation creeping into his voice. Every day we delay, thousands more of my people die. Our children are being harvested for their neural tissue. Our elders are worked to death in their mining operations. The Aquarian delegates' gills fluttered with distress. Perhaps we could offer humanitarian aid. Medical supplies, food shipments? The Vorthons shoot down any vessel that enters their controlled space, Kethavar said. They want to break our spirit completely before the final assault. Humanitarian aid cannot reach us. For 3 hours the debate continued. The Crystalline Collective worried about economic impacts. The machine synthesis calculated probability matrices that showed unfavorable odds. The ethereal commune meditated on the cosmic implications. Each species had reasons why immediate military action was impossible or inadvisable. Finally, an ancient voice spoke from the observation galleries above. What about the humans? The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned toward the speaker, Elder Vexithani of the Mystic Order. Her species was among the oldest in the galaxy, and her words carried weight. The humans, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper yet somehow carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. They are not members of our council, but they are allies to many here. Perhaps they might respond where we cannot. Speaker Drakthol's forked tongue flickered nervously. The humans are a young species. They've been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. What could they possibly do against the Vorthon Empire? They have something we have lost, Elder Vexthani said softly. They still remember how to be truly angry. Ambassador Cathvar felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. He had heard stories about humanity, whispered tales from traders and explorers. They were supposedly violent, unpredictable, and utterly without regard for conventional wisdom. Most civilized species considered them barely controlled savages. Right now, savages might be exactly what the Zephyrians needed. Where would we find them? Cathavar asked. Their embassy is on Neutral Station 7, the elder replied. But I warn you, Ambassador, if you ask for their help, you must be prepared for the consequences. Humans do not fight wars the way we do. They do not follow the Galactic Convention on Civilized Warfare. When they commit to violence, they commit completely. The council erupted in debate once more. Some delegates were horrified at the suggestion of involving humanity in galactic affairs. Others worried about the precedent it would set. But Cathvar was no longer listening. His mind was made up. As the session concluded without any firm commitments from the council, Cathvar quietly slipped away. His personal transport was fueled and ready. Neutral Station 7 was only 2 jumps away through hyperspace. If the council wouldn't act, perhaps the humans would. The journey gave him time to research what little information existed about human military capabilities. Most of it was classified or heavily redacted, but what he could find was both impressive and terrifying. Humans had fought several conflicts since joining the galactic community, always emerging victorious despite being outgunned and outnumbered. What struck him most was a comment from a Helian military observer who had witnessed human combat operations. They don't just defeat their enemies, they make examples of them. Neutral Station 7 appeared on his view screen as a massive rotating wheel of metal and ceramic. bristling with docking ports and defensive systems. Ships from dozens of species came and went in carefully orchestrated patterns. The human embassy occupied a modest section in the diplomatic quarter, marked only by a simple blue flag bearing white stars and red stripes. As Keithvar's transport docked, he wondered what kind of beings he would find inside. The humans had a reputation for being emotional and impulsive, but they also had something most galactic species had forgotten. They still fought their own wars. The docking bay was sterile and efficient, much like every other diplomatic facility on the station. But as Keithvar approached the human embassy entrance, he noticed something different. The two guards flanking the door weren't the typical ceremonial figures found at most embassies. These humans wore actual combat gear, and their eyes constantly scanned the corridor for threats. One of them, a female with short brown hair and scars across her left cheek, stepped forward. "Ambassador Keithvar of Zephyr Prime, Ambassador Chen is expecting you." How they had known he was coming, Keithvar couldn't say, but as the embassy doors sealed behind him, he felt as though he had crossed a threshold into something far more dangerous than simple diplomacy. The human embassy was unlike any diplomatic facility he had ever entered. Where other species favored ornate decorations and symbols of their cultural achievements, the human space was starkly functional. Maps covered the walls showing shipping lanes, trade routes, and military installations throughout known space. Computer terminals hummed quietly as staff members analyzed data streams from across the galaxy. Ambassador Sarah Chen rose from behind a simple metal desk as Keithvar entered her office. She was younger than he had expected, perhaps 40 standard years, with gray-streaked black hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about him in seconds. "Ambassador Keithvar," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I've been following the situation in Zephyrian space. Please sit down and tell me exactly what you need." For the second time that day, Keithvar found himself describing his people's desperate situation. But this time felt different. Ambassador Chen didn't offer sympathy or political platitudes. Instead, she asked sharp, tactical questions about Vorthan fleet composition, supply lines, and strategic objectives. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair and was silent for nearly a full minute. Finally, she spoke. "Ambassador, I want to be very clear about what you're asking. If humanity intervenes in this conflict, we won't be following Galactic Council protocols. We won't be limiting ourselves to civilized warfare. We will use every tool at our disposal to stop the Vorthons, regardless of what other species might think about our methods." "I understand," Keithvar replied, though he wasn't entirely sure he did. "No, you don't," Chen said quietly. "But you will. Give me 12 hours to consult with Earth Command. I'll have an answer for you tomorrow." As Keithvar left the human embassy, he felt both hope and dread warring in his chest. He had set something in motion, something that might save his people or damn them all. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided to go to war. Ambassador Chen stared at the classified files scrolling across her secure terminal, long after Keithvar had departed. The Zephyrian situation was worse than the public reports indicated. Intelligence suggested the Vorthons weren't just conquering territory. They were conducting systematic genocide, harvesting biological materials from captured populations, and testing new weapons of mass destruction. The communication link to Earth Command activated with a soft chime. Fleet Admiral Rodriguez appeared on her screen, his weathered face bearing the scars of 3 decades of naval service. Behind him, she could see the Earth Defense Coordination Center buzzing with activity. "Sarah, I've been expecting your call," Rodriguez said without preamble. "We've been monitoring the Vorthon advance." "What's the Zephyrian ambassador asking for?" "Military intervention, sir. Full-scale war against the Vorthon Empire." Chen pulled up a tactical display showing the current state of Zephyrian space. "They've got maybe 30 days before total collapse." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, studying the data. "The Vorthons have been testing us for months, probing our shipping lanes, scanning our defense platforms, gathering intelligence on our capabilities. This might be the excuse they're looking for to move against human space. Or it might be our chance to hit them before they're ready for us," Chen replied. "Intelligence suggests they're planning something big. If we wait for them to finish with the Zephyrians, we'll be facing their full strength." The Admiral nodded slowly. "The President has already been briefed. We're convening an emergency session of the Defense Council. But Sarah, if we do this, we need to do it right. The galaxy has never seen human military doctrine in full application. Once we show them what we're capable of, there's no going back to the shadows. I understand, sir. But the Zephyrians are good people. They don't deserve what's happening to them. No, they don't. Stand by for orders. This goes all the way to the top now. The connection ended, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. She had served as humanity's ambassador for 5 years, watching as other species dismissed humans as primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. They saw humanity's brief spacefaring history and assumed weakness. They observed human emotion and mistook it for instability. None of them understood that humanity had spent its entire existence fighting wars. While other species had achieved peace through evolution or philosophy, humans had earned it through blood and determination. Every generation had faced extinction and somehow survived. It was written into their very DNA. Chen accessed another classified file, this one containing psychological profiles of human military personnel. The reports painted a picture that would terrify most galactic citizens. Humans could function effectively in combat for extended periods that would drive other species insane. They could endure casualties that would break the morale of any other military force. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to become more effective the more desperate their situation became. The communication system chimed again. This time, it was a Priority 1 signal directly from Earth. President Martinez appeared on screen, flanked by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Director of Central Intelligence. Ambassador Chen, the President began, we've reviewed the situation. The decision has been made to offer military assistance to the Zephyrians. However, we need to be absolutely certain they understand what they're asking for. Sir, I've already explained that we don't follow galactic warfare conventions. That's not enough, interrupted General Morrison, the Army Chief of Staff. We need them to formally request unrestricted human military intervention. No limitations, no complaints about our methods, no interference with our operations. If they want our help, they get all of it. Director Walsh leaned forward. Our analysis suggests this conflict will escalate beyond just the Zephyrian theater. The Vorthans have been building towards something big for decades. This might be our only chance to stop them before they become unstoppable. President Martinez nodded gravely. Sarah, make it clear to the Zephyrian ambassador that if humanity enters this war, we enter it to win. Not to negotiate, not to contain the threat, but to eliminate it entirely. If he can accept those terms, we'll mobilize immediately. Understood, Mr. President. And Sarah, make sure he understands that once we start, we don't stop until every Vorthon military asset is either surrendered or destroyed. That's how humans fight wars. The next morning, Ambassador Kethvar arrived at the human embassy with visible exhaustion. He hadn't slept, spending the night watching reports of 3 more Zephyrian colonies falling to Vorthon assault fleets. Each report brought news of atrocities that made his crystalline skin crawl. Ambassador Chen, he said as he was ushered into her office, do you have an answer from your government? Chen gestured for him to sit. On her desk was a single document, printed on actual paper, a human tradition that other species found quaint but humans insisted upon. For the most important agreements, humanity is prepared to offer military assistance to the Zephyrian Republic, she said carefully. However, there are conditions that must be understood and formally accepted. Name them, Kethvar said without hesitation. First, you are requesting unrestricted human military intervention. That means no limitations on our tactics, weapons, or strategic objectives. We fight this war the way we see fit. Agreed. Second, once we engage the Vorthans, we will pursue total victory. Not a negotiated settlement, not a ceasefire, but the complete destruction of their ability to wage war. This may take years. Kethvar's translator struggled with some of the nuances, but the meaning was clear. You're talking about total war. Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. Humans don't do limited conflicts very well. When we commit to violence, we commit completely. My people are facing extinction, Kethvar said quietly. I'll agree to whatever terms are necessary. Chen slid the document across her desk. This is a formal request for unrestricted military aid, written according to human legal standards. If you sign this, you're giving humanity complete operational authority in the war against the Vorthan Empire. We'll consult with you on matters affecting Zephyrian civilians, but all military decisions will be ours alone. Kethvar read through the document quickly. The language was precise and unambiguous. He was essentially signing over command of his species' survival to a race most of the galaxy considered barely civilized barbarians. He signed without hesitation. "How quickly can your forces deploy?" he asked. Chen smiled, and for the first time Kethvar saw something in her expression that reminded him why other species feared humanity. "Ambassador, the first human task force is already in hyperspace. They launched 6 hours ago. The moment you requested our aid, we started moving assets into position. But you didn't know if I would sign your terms." "No. But we knew that if you didn't, we'd probably end up fighting the Vorthons eventually anyway. At least this way we choose the time and place." Kethvar felt a chill run through his crystalline structure. "What kind of force are you sending?" "The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet under the command of Admiral Zhang. 12 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, 4 carriers, 2 assault transports, and 1 Dreadnought-class battleship. Approximately 15,000 personnel. Against the entire Vorthon Empire? Ambassador Chen, they have hundreds of ships, millions of troops." Chen's smile widened. "Ambassador Kethvar, you're thinking like every other galactic species. You're assuming this is about matching numbers and firepower. That's not how humans fight wars. Then how do you fight them? We find our enemy's weakness and we exploit it until they break. We don't just defeat armies, we destroy the will to fight. We don't just win battles, we make our enemies afraid to face us again." She activated a holographic display showing the current tactical situation in Zephyrian space. "The Vorthons think they're hunting sheep. They've organized their forces for easy conquest and resource extraction. They're spread thin because they don't expect real resistance. And now they're going to get it? Ambassador, in 72 hours, the Vorthon Empire is going to learn what happens when humans decide something must be stopped. By the time we're finished, they'll wish they had never heard of the Zephyrian Republic." As Kethvar left the human embassy, he noticed something that hadn't been there the day before. The embassy staff were all wearing different uniforms now, not diplomatic dress but military fatigues. The ceremonial guards had been replaced by soldiers carrying weapons he didn't recognize. The humans weren't just offering aid. They were already at war. Across the galaxy in the cold depths of space, the human 3rd Expeditionary Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian territory. Admiral Zhang stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as her sensors cataloged the destruction the Vorthons had wrought. "Tactical analysis?" she asked her operations officer. "Vorthon forces are scattered across 7 systems conducting planetary subjugation operations. Their main battle fleet is holding position at Zephyr Prime, probably waiting for resistance to collapse before beginning orbital bombardment." "Time to teach them a lesson about human patience," Zhang said quietly. "Signal all ships. We're going hunting." Admiral Zhang studied the tactical display on the bridge of the UES Retribution as her fleet approached the outer edge of the Kepler 442 system. The Vorthons had established a forward supply base here, feeding their advance into Zephyrian space. Intelligence suggested it was lightly defended. The Empire was so confident in their superiority that they hadn't bothered with heavy fortifications. That arrogance was about to cost them dearly. "Admiral, we're detecting 16 Vorthon vessels in the system," reported Commander Torres from the sensor station, "mostly light cruisers and supply ships. 2 heavy escorts guarding the main depot. Any sign they've detected us?" "Negative. They're running standard patrol patterns, no indication of alert status." Zhang nodded. The Vorthons were about to receive their first lesson in human warfare. Never assume you're safe just because your enemy seems weaker than you. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Execute attack pattern Omega. All ships are weapons free. No survivors, no prisoners, no mercy." The human ships split into 3 attack groups approaching the Vorthon position from different vectors. Their stealth technology, while not perfect, was far superior to anything the galactic community had seen before. Humans had developed it during their own wars, when being detected meant certain death. Commander Vexthok of the Vorthon Supply Depot was reviewing cargo manifests when the first human torpedoes struck his outer perimeter ships. The explosions lit up the darkness of space with brilliant flashes that lasted only seconds before the targeted vessels simply ceased to exist. "What was that?" Vexthok demanded, his forearms working frantically at his command console. "Report. Unknown contacts approaching from multiple vectors," his sensor operator replied, panic clear in his synthesized voice. "I count 12. No, 14 vessels. Configuration unknown. Vexthok's blood ran cold. No one should have been able to approach his position undetected. The Vorthan sensor networks were the most advanced in known space. Transmit a distress signal to Central Command. Alert all ships to battle stations, but it was already too late. The human attack was unfolding with a precision and ferocity that defied everything the Vorthons understood about galactic warfare. Most species announced their presence, demanded surrender, or at least exchanged threats before opening fire. The humans had simply appeared and started killing. The UES Retribution unleashed a full broadside from its magnetic acceleration cannons, sending depleted uranium slugs screaming across space at 20% of light speed. The target, a Vorthan heavy cruiser, had its shields and armor stripped away in seconds before the kinetic impacts tore through its hull like tissue paper. Target destroyed, Torres reported with professional calm, moving to engage next priority. Across the battlefield, human ships were systematically dismantling the Vorthon force with weapons that violated several galactic conventions. Kinetic bombardment weapons were considered excessively destructive by most civilized species. Plasma torpedoes that burned through shields instead of simply overwhelming them were viewed as cruel, and the humans' guided missile system seemed to anticipate evasive maneuvers with an almost supernatural accuracy. Commander Vexthok watched his fleet die around him with growing horror. His ships weren't just being destroyed, they were being hunted. The human vessels moved with coordination that spoke of countless hours of combat experience, each ship supporting the others in ways that maximized damage and minimized their own exposure. "Sir, the Drathmore is requesting permission to withdraw," his communications officer reported. "Denied. We hold this position until Central Command sends reinforcements." But even as he spoke, Vexthok knew no reinforcements would arrive in time. The humans had chosen their target perfectly, striking a supply base far from major fleet concentrations. This wasn't a random raid. It was a calculated blow designed to cripple Vorthan logistics. The UES Retribution's targeting systems locked onto the main supply depot, a massive station that served as the distribution hub for 3 Vorthon assault fleets. Admiral Zhang studied the structure for a moment, noting the thousands of Vorthan personnel visible through transparent sections. Tactical. Prepare a full spread of Hellfire missiles. Target the station's reactor core. Admiral, sensors indicate significant civilian personnel aboard that station, Commander Torres said quietly. "There are no civilians in the Vorthon military infrastructure," Zhang replied coldly. "Every person on that station is part of the war machine that's been slaughtering Zephyrian children. Fire when ready." The missiles streaked across space, their warheads designed to penetrate deep into enemy ships before detonating. The supply station's defenses, built to repel conventional attacks, were useless against weapons that burrowed through armor plating before exploding. The station's destruction lit up the system like a newborn star, the explosion visible from dozens of light years away. When the glare faded, nothing remained but expanding clouds of superheated gas and debris. "All Vorthon vessels destroyed," Torres reported. "No escape pods detected. Signal the fleet to form up. We're moving to the next target." The Battle of Kepler 442 lasted exactly 18 minutes. When it was over, an entire Vorthon supply network had been erased from existence. Not a single human ship had taken significant damage. But more importantly, word of the engagement was already spreading through Vorthon communication networks. Back at Vorthon Central Command, War Leader Krathvel stared at the incoming reports with disbelief. An entire supply depot had been destroyed by unknown attackers. 16 ships lost with no survivors. No identification of the attacking force. Could this be some new Zephyrian weapon? He asked his intelligence aide. Impossible, War Leader. The Zephyrians lack the technology for such an attack. Their remaining ships are hiding in deep space, afraid to engage our smallest patrol vessels. Krathvel studied the tactical analysis, trying to make sense of what had happened. The attack patterns suggested military doctrine unlike anything in Galactic Council databases. The weapons used were primitive in concept, but devastatingly effective in application. Has anyone claimed responsibility for this attack? Yes, War Leader. We received a single transmission from one of the attacking vessels before they departed the system. Show me. The holographic display activated, showing the image of a human female in military uniform. Admiral Zhang's face was calm, professional, and absolutely without mercy. This message is for the Vorthon High Command. I am Admiral Zhang of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. You are currently engaged in acts of genocide against the Zephyrian Republic, a species that has requested our protection. We are here to inform you that your war is now with us." The message paused as Zhang leaned forward slightly, her eyes seeming to look directly at Krathavel through the recording. "You have exactly 72 hours to begin complete withdrawal from all Zephyrian territories. Any Vorthon military assets found in Zephyrian space after that deadline will be destroyed without warning. Any Vorthon personnel found participating in atrocities against civilian populations will be treated as war criminals." Another pause. When Zhang spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made Krathavel's scales crawl. "We know you've never encountered humans before. You have no idea what we're capable of. That ignorance ends now. We are not the Galactic Council. We do not debate or negotiate or seek diplomatic solutions. We identify threats to innocent life and we eliminate them." The message flickered and changed, now showing tactical displays of the destroyed Vorthon fleet. The human ships moved through the wreckage like apex predators, confirming their kills with cold efficiency. "This is what happened to your supply depot at Kepler 442. Every ship, every station, every military asset you deployed there has been reduced to space debris. We did this in 18 minutes with a single task force." Zhang's face returned to the screen. "Imagine what our full fleet will do to your homeworld if you don't leave Zephyrian space. You have 72 hours. We suggest you use them wisely." The transmission ended, leaving Krathavel's command center in stunned silence. For the first time in his military career, the war leader found himself facing an enemy that hadn't demanded terms or threatened consequences. These humans had simply announced their intentions and then demonstrated their capabilities. "War leader, what are our orders?" his aide asked nervously. Krathavel stared at the empty holographic display for a long moment. The Vorthon Empire had conquered dozens of species over the past 1,000 years. They had perfected the art of intimidation, using superior technology and ruthless tactics to break their enemies' will to fight. But these humans seemed unimpressed by Vorthon military might. They had struck without warning, shown no mercy, and promised much worse to come. For the first time in his career, Krathavel was dealing with an enemy that might be even more ruthless than the Vorthons themselves. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," he ordered finally. "I want intelligence on this human species immediately. Every ship, every base, every military installation they possess. If we're going to fight them, I need to know what we're facing." "And the withdrawal deadline?" Krathavel's mandibles clicked in anger. "The Vorthon Empire does not retreat. Double the assault on Zephyr Prime. I want the Zephyrian homeworld taken before these humans can interfere again." Response: the human fleet. War leader Krathavel stood before the massive holographic display in the Vorthon Empire's primary war room, watching as status updates flowed in from across Zephyrian space. His decision to accelerate the assault on Zephyr Prime had mobilized the largest Vorthon fleet in 3 centuries, over 200 ships converging on the Zephyrian. "Homeworld, status report," he demanded. "Fleet commander." Zarthak materialized via hologram from the bridge of the inevitable death, the Empire's most powerful dreadnought. "All assault fleets are in position around Zephyr Prime, war leader. The planet's orbital defenses have been reduced to 12% operational capacity. We estimate 6 hours before we can begin planetary bombardment." "And the human ships?" "No sign of them, sir. Our long-range sensors show empty space throughout the system. Either they've retreated or they're using some form of advanced stealth technology." Krathavel studied the tactical display showing Zephyr Prime surrounded by Vorthon vessels. The planet below was a beautiful blue-green world, home to over 4 billion Zephyrians. Soon it would be another conquest, another example of Vorthon supremacy. "Continue the assault. I want the planet's surrender within 8 hours." But even as he spoke, Krathavel felt uneasy. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that didn't match their brief spacefaring history. Their tactics suggested centuries of warfare experience, and their weapons technology was far more advanced than intelligence reports had indicated. What he couldn't have known was that 3 light minutes away from Zephyr Prime, the human 3rd Expeditionary Fleet hung in perfect silence behind a small moon, every system powered down to minimum levels. Admiral Zhang stood in the darkened bridge of the UES Retribution, watching passive sensors track the Vorthon fleet's positions. "Tactical analysis?" she asked quietly. Commander Torres worked at his station by the light of dim red emergency lighting. 212 Vorthon vessels, including 6 Dreadnought-class battleships, They formed a standard orbital bombardment formation, classic Vorthan doctrine, overwhelming firepower concentrated for maximum psychological impact. Perfect, Zhang murmured. They're fighting the last war. The Vorthans had arranged their fleet in the same formation they had used to conquer dozens of other worlds, ships positioned for efficient bombardment, with their heaviest units in the center and escorts spread wide to prevent enemy interference. It was a formation designed to maximize destructive capability while minimizing the chance of effective counterattack. Against most galactic militaries, it was nearly unbeatable. Against humans, it was a death trap. Signal the fleet, Zhang ordered. Execute Lazarus Protocol. All ships switched to combat power on my mark. The Lazarus Protocol was humanity's answer to overwhelming enemy numbers. Instead of meeting superior forces head-on, human ships would strike from unexpected angles with weapons designed to maximize damage per engagement. It was a doctrine born from Earth's long history of asymmetric warfare. Admiral, we're significantly outnumbered, Torres pointed out. Even with our technological advantages, those are impossible odds, Zhang smiled grimly. Commander, the Vorthans are assuming we'll fight like everyone else in the galaxy. They expect fleet-to-fleet combat where numbers determine victory. They're about to learn why humanity has never lost a war. At her signal, the human fleet powered up simultaneously. Fusion reactors that had been running cold blazed to life, sending massive energy signatures across Vorthan sensors. Weapon systems that the galaxy had never seen before came online, their targeting systems already locked onto predetermined enemy positions. On the bridge of the inevitable death, Fleet Commander Zarthak watched in growing alarm as his sensors lit up with contact signatures. Report, he barked. 14 unknown vessels bearing 27 Mark IV. They appeared out of nowhere, sir. Energy signatures are off the charts. Zarthak studied the display. 14 ships against over 200 seemed like suicide, even for these apparently insane humans. But something about their formation bothered him. They weren't approaching in a standard attack pattern. Instead, they were spreading out, each ship taking a different vector. All ships target the unknown contacts, destroy them before they can interfere with the bombardment. But the human ships were already moving at velocities that should have been impossible for vessels their size. The UES Retribution led the charge, its experimental drive systems pushing it to nearly 8% of light speed. At that velocity, incoming fire became a mathematical exercise in probability rather than accuracy. The first Vorthan salvo lit up space with energy beams and missile trails, but the human ships danced between the incoming fire like wraiths. Their electronic warfare systems, developed during humanity's own conflicts, turned Vorthan targeting computers against each other. Then the humans opened fire. The UES Retribution's primary weapon was something no other galactic species had ever conceived. A mass driver capable of accelerating projectiles to 15% of light speed. The tungsten rod it fired wasn't much larger than a telephone pole, but it struck the Vorthan dreadnought Endless Conquest with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The impact tore through the alien ship's shields as if they didn't exist, punched through 17 decks of armor plating, and detonated the vessel's main reactor. The explosion took out 2 nearby cruisers and severely damaged a third. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human ships struck targets with impossible accuracy and devastating effect. The humans weren't just fighting, they were demonstrating technologies that seemed to violate known physics. How are they moving that fast? Zarthak demanded, watching human ships accelerate and turn at rates that should have pulverized their crews. His tactical officer worked frantically at his console. Unknown, sir. Their inertial compensators must be far more advanced than ours. And their weapons. Sir, I've never seen kinetic weapons with that kind of velocity. The UES Prometheus, a human destroyer, unleashed a spread of guided missiles that seemed to think for themselves. Each projectile adjusted its course mid-flight, compensating for evasive maneuvers and coordinating with its siblings to ensure maximum damage. When they impacted their targets, they didn't simply explode. They burrowed deep into enemy hulls before detonating, ensuring complete destruction. Sir, we've lost 36 ships in 4 minutes, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. The humans are using some kind of coordinated targeting system. Every hit is precisely placed for maximum damage. Zarthak watched the tactical display with growing horror. His massive fleet was being systematically dismantled by a force a fraction of its size. But worse than the losses was the realization that the humans were toying with them. They could have concentrated their fire and eliminated the command ships first. Instead, they were methodically working through the Vorthan fleet, making sure every ship understood it was helpless before destroying it. The human carrier UES Yorktown launched waves of fighters that moved like no piloted craft Zarthak had ever seen. They accelerated at rates that would have killed organic pilots, performed maneuvers that seemed to ignore basic physics, and attacked with coordination that suggested shared consciousness. "Are those fighters unmanned?" he asked. "Negative, sir. We're detecting life signs aboard each craft. Somehow their pilots are surviving accelerations that should be fatal." What the Vorthans couldn't understand was that human fighter pilots were connected to their craft through neural interfaces. Their consciousness temporarily merged with artificial intelligences that could calculate optimal flight paths in milliseconds. It was technology developed during humanity's war with their own AI systems, when the difference between victory and extinction often came down to reaction times measured in microseconds. The tide of battle turned into a rout when Admiral Zhang deployed humanity's most closely guarded secret. The UES Retribution's hangar bays opened, revealing what appeared to be a single small craft. But as it launched, the vessel split into dozens of identical copies, each one real and solid. "Quantum multiplication matrices," Zhang explained to her bewildered crew. "Each duplicate is a complete vessel existing in parallel dimensions and projected into our reality. The enemy can't destroy what technically doesn't exist in their dimensional space." The duplicated ships struck the Vorthan fleet like a swarm of wasps, each one targeting critical systems with surgical precision. Command centers, weapon arrays, life support systems, everything necessary to keep a ship fighting was systematically eliminated. Within 20 minutes, the mightiest Vorthan fleet in history had been reduced to drifting hulks. Ships that weren't destroyed outright found their crews unconscious or dead from life support failures, their weapons offline, their engines dead. Fleet Commander Zarthak sat in the ruins of his command bridge, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows across walls scorched by electrical fires. Half his crew was dead, his ship was powerless, and the humans were broadcasting a message on all frequencies. Admiral Zhang's image filled what remained of his main display. "This is Admiral Zhang to all Vorthan forces in Zephyrian space. Your fleet has been neutralized. Your war machine has been broken. You have one chance to prevent the complete annihilation of your species. Effective Emeti." Supreme War Leader Thexkral stood in the most secure chamber of the Vorthan homeworld, surrounded by holographic displays showing the disaster at Zephyr Prime. The most powerful fleet in Vorthan history had been annihilated by 14 human ships commanded by creatures that had been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. "Show me the tactical analysis again," he ordered, his forearms gesturing at the display with barely controlled fury. Military advisor Keshavar activated the recordings, and the chamber filled with images of human vessels moving at impossible speeds, firing weapons that violated known physics, and demonstrating technologies that shouldn't exist. The Vorthan Empire had spent 1,000 years perfecting the art of war, yet these newcomers had rendered centuries of doctrine obsolete in half an hour. "How many survivors?" Thexkral asked. 43 ships managed to escape the system, Supreme War Leader. Most are heavily damaged. Fleet Commander Zarthak is among the survivors, but his flagship is completely disabled. Thexkral studied the transmission from Admiral Zhang, replaying the human's ultimatum for the 10th time. The woman's face showed no emotion, no hint of bluff or uncertainty. She had delivered terms that would effectively end the Vorthan Empire as a military power, and she clearly expected compliance. "Have we received any response from the Galactic Council?" he asked. "Negative, sir. Our ambassadors report that the Council is in emergency session, but no formal statement has been issued." That silence spoke volumes. The Council had stood aside while the Vorthans conquered dozens of species over the centuries, always finding reasons why military intervention was impossible or inadvisable. Now that humanity had demonstrated the ability to challenge Vorthan supremacy, the Council was waiting to see how the situation developed. "What do we know about human military capabilities?" Keshavar activated another display showing intelligence assessments from the past 5 years. "Very little, Supreme War Leader. They've been careful to limit their military demonstrations to minor conflicts with pirates and raiders. Most of their technology appears primitive by galactic standards. But today's battle suggests we've severely underestimated their actual capabilities. Or they've been deliberately hiding them, Thexkral mused. No species develops weapons like we saw today without extensive testing and refinement. They must have been preparing for this kind of conflict for years. The strategic implications were staggering. If humanity possessed military technology significantly beyond current galactic standards, then the balance of power that had existed for millennia was about to shift dramatically. The Vorthons had maintained their empire through superior technology and ruthless tactics, but the humans seemed to surpass them in both areas. Supreme War Leader, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth, the communications officer reported. Earth? The human homeworld? Yes, sir. The transmission is directed specifically to you, from someone identifying himself as Fleet Admiral Rodriguez. Thexkral hesitated. Direct communication with enemy leadership during active hostilities was unusual, but these humans had already proven they didn't follow standard protocols. Display the message. Admiral Rodriguez appeared as a hologram standing in what was clearly a military command center. Behind him, Thexkral could see status boards tracking ship movements across multiple star systems, suggesting the humans had forces deployed far beyond what they had revealed at Zephyr Prime. Supreme War Leader Thexkral, Rodriguez began, without preamble. I am Fleet Admiral Rodriguez, Commanding Officer of Earth Defense Forces. I'm contacting you to clarify the terms offered by Admiral Zhang and to provide additional context you may find relevant. The human paused, studying notes on a tablet before continuing. Our forces at Zephyr Prime represent approximately 2% of human military capability. The weapons and tactics you witnessed are standard equipment for our expeditionary fleets. We have significantly more advanced assets that we prefer not to deploy unless absolutely necessary. Thexkral felt his scales crawl. If the devastation at Zephyr Prime represented only 2% of human capability, then his empire was facing an enemy far more powerful than anything in recorded galactic history. You have 48 hours remaining to begin compliance with our terms, Rodriguez continued. During that time, we will not engage Vorthon forces that are clearly withdrawing from Zephyrian space. However, any attempt to reinforce your positions or continue military operations will result in immediate escalation. The display changed to show a star chart marking human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Thexkral counted at least 30 distinct force concentrations, many near critical Vorthon supply lines and communication hubs. As you can see, we have positioned assets to interdict your major shipping routes and strategic installations. If you choose to reject our terms, we are prepared to implement a complete blockade of Vorthon space while systematically reducing your military infrastructure. Rodriguez leaned forward and his expression hardened. Supreme War Leader, I want to be very clear about something. Humanity did not seek this conflict. We responded to a request for aid from a species facing genocide. Our intervention ends the moment you comply with our terms and withdraw from Zephyrian territory. However, he continued, if you choose to escalate this conflict, you will discover that humans have a very different philosophy regarding warfare than most galactic species. We don't fight to achieve strategic objectives or negotiate favorable settlements. When humans go to war, we fight to eliminate threats permanently. The transmission ended, leaving Thexkral to contemplate the most difficult decision in Vorthon history. The Empire could attempt to continue the war, mobilizing their full military might against an enemy of unknown capability. Or they could accept terms that would effectively end their role as a galactic power. Supreme War Leader, Keshavar said quietly, the Military Council is requesting an immediate session to discuss response options. Thexkral nodded absently, still studying the human force deployments. The positions were perfectly calculated to cause maximum disruption with minimum effort. These humans understood strategic planning at a level that suggested extensive experience with large-scale conflicts. Schedule the session. But first, I want complete intelligence files on human military history, everything we have, no matter how classified. An hour later, Thexkral sat in the Empire's most secure conference chamber, surrounded by the highest-ranking military leaders in Vorthon space. The intelligence briefing had been sobering. Humans had apparently spent their entire existence at war, fighting conflicts that made Vorthon military actions seem restrained by comparison. "The situation is clear," announced war leader Vashtel, commander of the Empire's heavy assault fleets. "We cannot allow a primitive species to dictate terms to the Vorthan Empire. I propose immediate mobilization of all reserve fleets for a direct assault on Earth itself." "With what?" demanded Fleet Commander Zelthak. "Our most powerful battle group was destroyed in 30 minutes by 14 human ships. How do you propose to assault a homeworld defended by hundreds of such vessels?" "The humans are bluffing," Vashatel insisted. "No species can develop technology that advanced in such a short time frame. They must have discovered some ancient alien artifact or formed an alliance with a hidden civilization." Thexcrawl listened to the debate with growing frustration. His military leaders were thinking like Vorthons, assuming that superior numbers and conventional tactics would eventually prevail. But the humans had demonstrated that they didn't fight conventional wars. "Enough," he said finally, and the chamber fell silent. "Military Advisor Keshavar, present the analysis of human historical conflicts." Keshavar activated the holographic display, showing a timeline of human warfare spanning thousands of years. "Our xenoarchaeologists have studied human military history extensively. What we discovered is that this species has never known true peace. They have fought continuously for millennia, developing increasingly sophisticated methods of warfare." The display showed images of human conflicts, from primitive tribal warfare to massive global conflicts involving nuclear weapons. Most significantly, humans have repeatedly faced extinction-level threats and survived through military innovation and tactical adaptation. They appear to become more effective the more desperate their situation becomes. "More disturbing," Keshavar continued, "is their approach to total war. When humans commit to large-scale conflict, they target not just enemy military forces but the entire infrastructure that supports enemy civilization. They don't seek to conquer. They seek to eliminate the enemy's ability to threaten them again." The chamber erupted in alarmed conversation. The concept of total war was known to Vorthon military doctrine, but they had never faced an enemy that practiced it so systematically. Thexcrawl raised one of his hands for silence. "What are the projected casualties if we reject the human terms and continue this conflict?" The Military Council's chief strategist, an ancient Vorthon named Kexthor, stepped forward. "Based on demonstrated human capabilities and their apparent force deployment, we estimate 60 to 80% of Vorthan military assets would be destroyed within 6 months. Civilian casualties could reach into the billions, and if we comply with their terms, they're reduced to a..." Ambassador Kethavar stood on the observation deck of the human fleet command ship, UES Retribution, watching as the last Vorthan vessels departed Zephyrian space. The massive enemy dreadnoughts that had terrorized his people for months now limped away like wounded animals. Their weapons powered down and their shields collapsed. "It's really over," he said quietly to Admiral Zhang, who stood beside him at the viewing port. "This part is," Zhang replied. "Now comes the harder work." Below them, Zephyr Prime slowly rotated in space, its surface scarred by Vorthan bombardment but its cities still intact. Nearly 4 billion Zephyrians had survived what should have been their extinction, and they had humanity to thank for it. "Admiral, I must ask, your technology, your weapons, your tactics, where did all of this come from? No species developed such capabilities in just 2 centuries of spaceflight." Zhang was quiet for a moment, watching a group of human medical ships approach the planet's orbital stations. "Ambassador, most galactic species achieved peace through evolution, philosophy, or simply luck. They developed beyond the need for warfare before they encountered serious threats." She turned to face him, and Kethavar saw something in her eyes that he was beginning to recognize as distinctly human, a mixture of sadness and grim determination. Humanity never had that luxury. "From the moment we developed consciousness, we've been fighting for survival, against predators, against the environment, against each other, against our own creations. Every generation of humans has faced extinction and somehow found a way to survive." The Admiral gestured toward the departing Vorthon fleet. "What you saw today wasn't the result of 2 centuries of development. It was the culmination of 50,000 years of continuous warfare. We didn't choose to be good at violence, we had to be, or we would have died out long ago." A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Commander Torres appeared on the nearest display, reporting from the bridge. "Admiral, we're receiving priority transmissions from Earth Command and the Galactic Council. Transfer the Earth Command signal to my ready room. Send the Council's message to Ambassador Chen on Neutral Station 7. As they walked toward Zhang's private office, Kethvar felt compelled to ask another question. Admiral, during the battle I observed your ships using technologies that seemed to violate known physics. Faster-than-light kinetic weapons, quantum multiplication matrices, inertial compensators that allow impossible acceleration. You're wondering if we're really as primitive as we appear? The thought had occurred to me. Zhang smiled grimly as they entered her office. Ambassador, humanity has been underestimated our entire existence. We found it useful to let other species continue believing we're simple barbarians who stumbled into space travel. The holographic display activated, showing Fleet Admiral Rodriguez from Earth Command. Behind him, Kethvar could see what appeared to be a massive command center coordinating operations across dozens of star systems. Admiral Zhang, excellent work at Zephyr Prime. The Vorthan withdrawal is proceeding ahead of schedule. However, we have a developing situation that requires your attention. Report, sir. Intelligence indicates that several major galactic powers are mobilizing their fleets. The Crystalline Collective has activated their defense protocols. The Aquarian Federation is recalling all ships to their core systems. Even the machine synthesis has begun manufacturing what appear to be military units. Zhang frowned. They're afraid of us. Can you blame them? Rodriguez asked. In less than a week, humanity has demonstrated military capabilities that exceed anything in known galactic history. We've defeated the Vorthan Empire, the galaxy's primary military threat, using technologies most species didn't know existed. What are our orders, sir? The President wants a diplomatic solution before this escalates into a galaxy-wide conflict. We're sending Ambassador Chen to address the Galactic Council directly. Your fleet is to remain in Zephyrian space for now, but be prepared for rapid deployment if necessary. After the transmission ended, Kethvar found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about humanity. Admiral, how many species know about your true capabilities? Until this week? None. We've been very careful to appear primitive and technologically limited. It served our interest to remain underestimated. But why reveal yourselves now? Zhang's expression hardened. Because your people were facing genocide, and the galaxy was doing nothing to stop it. Sometimes you have to show your strength to protect the innocent. 3 days later, Ambassador Chen stood before the assembled Galactic Council for the second time in a week. But the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Where before the delegates had viewed humanity as a minor species of little consequence, now they watched her with a mixture of fear and respect. Honored delegates, Chen began, I appear before you today to address concerns about humanity's recent military actions in Zephyrian space. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Speaker Drakthol leaned forward on his elevated platform, his reptilian features tense with anxiety. Ambassador Chen, the Council demands an explanation for humanity's unprovoked assault on Vorthan forces. The violence displayed by your species violates every principle of civilized warfare. Chen smiled coldly. Unprovoked? Speaker Drakthol, the Vorthans were conducting systematic genocide against the Zephyrian Republic. Ambassador Kethvar came before this very council begging for aid, and you offered nothing but empty sympathy and bureaucratic delays. The council was pursuing diplomatic solutions. The council was allowing innocent people to die while you debated procedures, Chen interrupted. Humanity chose to act when you would not. The Aquarian delegates' gills fluttered nervously. Your methods were excessive. The complete destruction of Vorthan military assets, the demonstration of weapons technology far beyond current galactic standards. It suggests humanity has been concealing its true capabilities for some time. We have, Chen admitted without hesitation. For 50 years, humanity has observed galactic politics and found it wanting. Species like the Vorthans commit atrocities while civilized governments debate responses. Military threats grow unchecked because no one wants to bear the cost of stopping them. She activated a holographic display showing the current galactic political map. The Vorthan Empire controlled over 200 star systems through military conquest. For centuries, they enslaved or exterminated dozens of species, and yet this council never took meaningful action against them. The Galactic Convention on Civilized Warfare specifically prohibits, began the Crystalline Collective, representative. The Galactic Convention is a document written by species that have forgotten what real threats look like, Chen said harshly. It assumes all conflicts can be resolved through negotiation and limited force. It works fine for trade disputes and border disagreements, but it's useless against enemies like the Vorthans. Elder Vexithani spoke from the observation gallery, her ancient voice carrying across the chamber. Ambassador Chen, your species has demonstrated the ability to project military force far beyond anything in galactic history. Many of our member species are concerned about humanity's intentions. Their concerns are understandable but misplaced, Chen replied. Humanity has no interest in conquest or domination. We want to trade, explore, and coexist peacefully with other species, but we will not stand aside while innocents suffer, because no one else has the courage to act. The chamber erupted in heated discussions as delegates debated humanity's words and their implications. Finally, Speaker Drakthol called for order. Ambassador Chen, the Council requires assurances that humanity will not use its military capabilities to threaten other species. Chen paused, considering her words carefully. I can offer this assurance: humanity will never attack a species that poses no threat to innocent life. We will never seek to conquer or subjugate other civilizations. We will never use our military power for personal gain or political advantage. However, she continued, and her voice took on a harder edge, if we encounter another situation like the Vorthan genocide, we will act swiftly and decisively. We will not wait for council debates or diplomatic protocols. We will not limit ourselves to civilized warfare when facing enemies who recognize no such limitations like what you're describing is vigilantism on a galactic scale, protested the machine synthesis delegate. What we're describing is responsibility, Chen replied. For too long, this galaxy has operated under the assumption that overwhelming force is inherently evil, that military action should always be a last resort pursued only after every other option has been exhausted. That philosophy works when dealing with reasonable opponents. It fails catastrophically against enemies like the Vorthans. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of different species. Humanity offers the galaxy a choice. We can work together to address threats before they become genocidal empires. We can establish rapid response protocols that don't require months of debate before taking action. We can create a system where species like the Zephyrians don't have to face extinction, while waiting for bureaucratic processes to run their course. And if we refuse? Asked the Saurian Confederacy representative. Then humanity will continue to act unilaterally when we deem it, because other species are unwilling. 6 months after the Battle of Zephyr Prime, Ambassador Kethavar stood in the rebuilt capital city of his homeworld, watching construction crews work alongside human engineering teams to repair the damage from Vorthon bombardment. The sight still amazed him. Beings from dozens of different species working together under human coordination, rebuilding what had been thought lost forever. The neural rehabilitation centers will be operational within 2 weeks, reported Dr. Sarah Kim, the human medical officer overseeing Zephyrian recovery operations. We've identified treatments for most of the Vorthan neural extraction procedures. The victims will recover, though it will take time. Kethvar nodded gratefully. The humans had not simply driven off the Vorthans and departed. They had stayed to help rebuild, bringing medical technology and engineering expertise that surpassed anything the galactic community possessed. More surprisingly, they had refused any payment for their assistance. Doctor, I must ask again, why do all of this? Your government has already spent enormous resources helping us recover. What does humanity gain from this investment? Dr. Kim smiled, the expression both warm and sad. Ambassador, my species learned long ago that security isn't just about defeating enemies. True security comes from building a galaxy, where species like the Vorthans can't rise to power in the first place. She gestured toward the construction sites where Zephyrians worked alongside humans, Aquarians, and even former Vorthon civilians who had requested asylum. Every species we help rebuild becomes a partner in maintaining peace. Every civilization that recovers from trauma becomes stronger and more capable of defending itself. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Ambassador Chen appeared on Kethavar's personal communicator, calling from the Galactic Council chambers on Neutral Station 7. Kethavar, I wanted you to hear this directly. The Council has voted to establish the Galactic Rapid Response Force, with humanity as the primary military component. We'll have authorization to intervene in cases of genocide, slavery, or other crimes against sapient life. Kethvar felt a surge of satisfaction. The galaxy was finally learning to act decisively against existential threats. What was the final vote? 47 species in favor, 12 opposed, 3 abstentions. The Vorthon delegation actually voted in favor, which surprised everyone. That did surprise Kethvar. The remnants of the Vorthon Empire had spent the past 6 months dealing with internal revolution as their former subjects rebelled against centuries of oppression. He would have expected them to oppose any measure that strengthened galactic enforcement capabilities. What changed their minds? Chen's expression grew thoughtful. I think they finally understand that the old system wasn't working for anyone, including them. The Vorthon Empire was collapsing under its own weight long before we arrived. They were too committed to military expansion to notice that their economy was failing, and their population was becoming increasingly unstable. The transmission shifted to show the council chamber, where delegates were signing the formal agreement, establishing the new rapid response protocols. Speaker Drakthol looked older than Kethvar remembered, but his voice carried new determination. This agreement represents a fundamental shift in how our galaxy responds to existential threats, the speaker announced. No longer will bureaucratic delays allow genocides to proceed while we debate appropriate responses. The Rapid Response Force is authorized to act immediately when innocent life is threatened. The force will be commanded jointly by representatives from humanity, the Aquarian Federation and the Crystalline Collective, Chen explained. But the majority of military assets will be human, since we're the only species with the necessary capabilities. Kethvar watched as Ambassador Chen signed the agreement on behalf of humanity. It was a historic moment, the first time in galactic history that a single species had been granted authority to use military force across multiple jurisdictions without prior approval from local governments. There will be opposition, he warned. Some species will see this as human imperialism disguised as peacekeeping. Probably, Chen agreed. But the alternative is returning to a system where species like yours face extinction, while everyone else debates proper procedures. We won't allow that to happen again. Later that day, Kethvar received a visitor he hadn't expected. Former Supreme War Leader Thexkral arrived on Zephyr Prime aboard a small civilian transport, requesting a private meeting. The fallen Vorthon leader looked nothing like the terrifying figure who had once commanded a galactic empire. His ceremonial armor had been replaced by simple robes, and his bearing suggested someone who had learned hard lessons about the price of unchecked aggression. Ambassador Kethvar, Thexkral said formally, I come to offer the apologies of the Vorthon people for the crimes committed against your species. No words can undo the suffering we caused, but I wanted to acknowledge our responsibility personally. Kethvar studied the former war leader carefully. Intelligence reports suggested that Thexkral had spent the past 6 months working to transform what remained of the Vorthon Empire into a peaceful confederation focused on internal development rather than external conquest. Your apology is noted, former war leader, but I'm curious about your real purpose here. Thexkral's mandibles clicked in what Kethvar recognized as Vorthon embarrassment. I wanted to understand how your species survived what we did to you. My people are facing something similar now. Former subjects seeking revenge, internal collapse, the prospect of extinction. I hoped you might offer guidance. The request was so unexpected that Kethvar needed a moment to process it. The Vorthons had spent 1,000 years conquering other species, and now their former victims were seeking vengeance with the same ruthless efficiency the Vorthons had once employed. What do you want from us? Help, Thexkral said simply. Not military intervention. The humans have made it clear they won't protect us from the consequences of our own actions. But perhaps advice? Assistance in transforming our society into something that can coexist peacefully with our neighbors? Kethvar was quiet for a long moment, considering the request. The Zephyrians had every reason to hate the Vorthons, to celebrate their downfall and enjoy their suffering. But that path led only to perpetual conflict and more innocents caught in cycles of revenge. I'll consider it, he said finally. But any assistance would come with conditions. Complete transparency about Vorthon military capabilities, full cooperation with war crimes tribunals, and absolute commitment to peaceful coexistence. Agreed, Thexkral said immediately. Ambassador, I won't pretend that all Vorthons share my perspective on these matters. But those of us who remain in positions of authority understand that the old ways led only to destruction. We're willing to try something different. As Thexacrel departed, Kethvar reflected on how much the galaxy had changed in just 6 months. The humans had done more than simply defeat the Vorthan Empire. They had fundamentally altered the balance of power that had existed for millennia. Species that had once operated without fear of consequences now knew that humanity was watching, ready to intervene if they crossed certain lines. Former victims of aggression were finding their voices, knowing that appeals for help would no longer fall on deaf ears. Even former aggressors like the Vorthans were beginning to understand that military conquest was no longer a viable path to power. A year later, Kethvar stood once again on the observation deck of a human starship, this time as an official observer aboard the UES Constitution, as it responded to reports of slavery and forced labor in the Helios sector. The Rapid Response Force had been activated 12 times in the past year, and each intervention had been swift, decisive, and effective. Target confirmed, reported Captain Morrison from the bridge. The Syndicate is using forced labor from at least 6 different species in their mining operations. Estimated 20,000 sapient beings in conditions that qualify as slavery under galactic law. Rules of engagement? Asked the tactical officer. Standard liberation protocol, Morrison replied. Disable their ships, secure the mining facilities, and prepare for civilian evacuation. These operations end today. Kethvar watched as human ships moved into position around the mining platforms, their movements coordinated with mathematical precision. But what struck him most was the presence of ships from other species, Aquarian medical vessels, crystalline collective cargo haulers, and even reformed Vorthan transports carrying humanitarian supplies. The galaxy was learning to work together in ways that would have been impossible before humanity's intervention. Species that had once stood aside while others suffered were now contributing to collective security efforts. The humans had shown them that overwhelming force, properly applied, could create peace rather than destroy it. Ambassador, Captain Morrison said as they watched the mining platform surrender without resistance. You've seen this process from both sides now. Any observations? Kethvar considered the question carefully. Captain, 6 months ago my people believed we were facing extinction with no hope of salvation. Today, we're helping to prevent other species from experiencing the same fate. The galaxy is a better place than it was, and the cost. Species like the Vorthans no longer have the freedom to commit sovereignty. But to commit atrocities without consequences. Some might see that as a loss of sovereignty, but I see it as the price of civilization. Morrison nodded. The president often says that freedom isn't just the right to do what you want. It's the responsibility to ensure others have the same rights you do. As the rescue operations proceeded below, Kethvar reflected on the simple truth that had emerged from humanity's intervention. The galaxy had always possessed the resources and capability to stop threats like the Vorthan Empire. What it had lacked was the will to act decisively when action was needed most. Humanity had provided that will, backed by the strength to make it meaningful. They had shown the galaxy that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be willing to fight for it. The age of endless debates and diplomatic delays was over. In its place had emerged something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization willing to use overwhelming force, not for conquest, but for protection of the innocent. Ambassador Kethvar smiled as he watched former slaves being evacuated to safety aboard ships from a dozen different species. His people had begged for aid when facing extinction, and humanity had answered with total war against those who threatened them. In doing so, they had given the galaxy something it had never possessed before, hope that innocence would always find a guardian, and that evil